Okay, folks, we're back for part 2 of the Reg-A Money Show, and Miguel, you got to admit, did I cook up the greatest pot of coffee today? And this is just delicious. I don't know, it might be because I'm thirsty, but man, is this coffee hitting the spot?
Yeah, dude, you always make the best coffee, and what I always enjoy is like putting a little bit of the espresso from next door, putting a little espresso on the bottom. I call it my depth charge, so that way I can get my coffee done up right.
Well, we're going to need the energy to answer this question, Miguel, because this is a very detailed question.
My energy doesn't come from my coffee, Ron. My energy comes from a well that I've dug in the backyard, and when I need it, I just go out there, I pull the bucket all the way down to the bottom where the water is, and then I lift the bucket up, and boom, I throw it over my head, and boom, I got the energy, and it's from a well that never ends. It never ends. It's a never-ending well of energy, my friend. Let's get back to our friends Robbie, who's out in Tempe, Arizona. Robbie, two-part question. I think is going to be the most important thing to hit with you, and I think the most important thing that we can talk about right now is the difference between how crowdfunding and Reg-A different. Okay, so let's talk about crowdfunding. Crowdfunding's been around for a long time. You're right, Robbie. Crowdfunding, you saw a lot of crowdfunding in the early stages with companies like Rocket Hub and Indiegogo, these platforms that did these raises for these guys that had projects or companies, the kind of like idea, like the biggest one that you saw was Kickstarter, okay? Kickstarter was really based on crowdfunding. Now, what Kickstarter started doing was, people were going on there and putting on projects, what they were referring to projects as companies, okay? And then what they were doing was, because they couldn't sell equity company, what they did was they said, okay, well, look, I'll give you a token of appreciation. I'll give you, a lot of the very first Kickstarter programs were for like tech, like tech watches, apps were big, movies were big, a lot of CDs for bands, that a band that had a nice following would do like a CD to pay for the recording cost, and then what they were doing was if you donated like $15, they'd give you the CD. You would be the first one. A lot of movie guys were doing movies, low-budget B films on crowdfunding because they would give them a producer credit, or they actually give them a shot in the movie, or they were doing a lot of benefits. A lot of people were doing, get this T-shirt or gift card. And then if you remember in those days, the tokens, right, would get more and more expensive as more and more money. I mean, I remember seeing, some credits for producer credits up to like $10,000 donations, because that's what they were. They were donations. They weren't anything more than that. And so that's how Kickstarter, Rocket Hub, Indiegogo, that's how they got around the way, because the SEC didn't even have any regulation yet. Okay, so then what happens is, the Jobs Act started all the crowdfunding stuff, okay? So that was how everything got started. So now Congress passes the law. Now what happens? Well, the SEC has to say, well, how do we administer this new law that Congress passed, the Jobs Act? How do we get companies to file and be current and use this law to access the capital markets? So then what does the SEC do? The SEC takes over 400 and some odd days to come out with a variation of a law of one of their own Reg-A, because Reg-A had been around for a long time. Okay, so what the Securities and Exchange Commission did was they took their own little spin to it, Ron, and that's where you get Reg-A plus, and then you get the Tier 1 and Tier 2. Now, all that did was allowed, okay, companies now to start selling equity. But what they did too was they defined crowdfunding. Now, they put new thresholds for the different crowdfunding that you can do, like $1 million, $5 million, $25 million, and $50 million. Now, all of those tier, and you'll see those in the law. If you look up the Jobs Act law and you look up specifically the crowdfunding, you'll see that they're all titles, okay? So there's Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. So when we're referring to these different titles, these are all the different titles of the law and all the thresholds that go along with them, so that way the SEC could deal with them. So you could do a crowdfunding program on a crowdfunding site now, and you could raise up to $5 million, or actually you could raise up to $1 million, depending on the type of investor that you use, the type of investment. So there is a lot of similarity in the crowdfunding because it all comes from the same Jobs Act. It all comes from the same law, right? But the one that we focus in on here on the Reg-A Money Show is, the Tier 2, because the Tier 2 is the one that has a very specific direction to go public, right? So it's like the one that we refer to as the mini IPO. It's the one that has the most direct line to going public. Now, if you wanted to stay private, there's nothing wrong with staying private, okay? And you can use Reg-A Tier 1 to stay private and to raise money. And you can use crowdfunding and crowdfunding portals to be able to use all that, okay? Because crowdfunding portals allows you, Ron, to raise up to, $1 million, $5 million, depending on the threshold and the type of crowdfunding program that you're using, okay? That's essentially what you're doing there, all right? Now, Ron, what do you think is the next progression of this?
Well, I think there's going to be an area where they're going to be able to raise way more than you can raise right now. Because a lot of these deals, even though for the Main Street guy may be low amounts, high amounts, I should say, in the industry, 50 mil is not really a whole lot. And they've actually even raised it to 75 mil. We did a show on that a while back.
That's right. So exactly, Ron. And so now, and that's not the only way to go public. I want you guys to understand that you could still do a traditional IPO, which is an initial public offering. And an initial public offering is very similar to a Reg-A Tier 2. But the only reason that the Reg-A Tier 2 works is because you could do a company that's a startup. Yes, a company that has historical financials can do a Reg-A, but they can also do an IPO too. But an IPO, you guys have to understand, an IPO is usually underwritten by a big bank or a big institutional bank or broker dealer, like somebody, like Chase or, Bank of America. Those are the IPOs. And normally, I'll be honest with you guys, normally a bank is not going to look at your IPO if you're not doing like $300, $400, $500 million. And do you know why? Why would they want to do a small $50 million IPO? Because there's no money in it for them. There's no commission. There's no VIG, baby. They're looking at a 10% commission on $50 million is only $5 million. Where they're doing $500 million, the 10% commission is now $50 million. So, guys, we're just talking about a scale of where, big banks will get involved in the underwriting process and take on that type of liability. Because, a $500 million IPO, you're talking about a company that has financials, that's not pre-revenue, that's already post-revenue, that has some operating history, that probably has a brand recognition. Like soon I hear that Dropbox is getting ready to do an IPO, Ron, and everybody uses Dropbox, right? And Dropbox would have been a great one to do a Reg-A because guess what? Everybody and their mother has a Dropbox account. You know what I'm saying? Because people store pictures on it that they don't want to store on their computers. They put it in the Dropbox, and everything is available to you. But, hey, guys, you could do an IPO. You could do a Reg-A. You could do a crowdfunding. What company is right for each one of these? I'll tell you. And that leads me to the second part of our question, right, for our boy Robbie. Robbie, look, if you're a startup company, okay, and like let's say you got a great idea for some technology or, we're talking about apps today because of Ron's, the app for the Echo. There's a lot of great apps out there, okay? Dude, Twitter was an app, okay? Twitter was just an app. Instagram was just an app. A lot of these companies are just apps. If you got an app that you're looking to raise, anywhere between $1 million to $5 million, you may want to start off with a crowdfunding a campaign, right? So you do your crowdfunding campaign and you raise your first $1 million or $5 million. You're private. You got everything taken care of, But then your investors start to knock on your door and saying, hey, when's the exit strategy? How can I get rid of my stock? I need to move some of my stock. Then you got to be in a position to be able to buy some of that stock back. Or, maybe you go to the next tier. Maybe you do a Reg-A tier 2, Reg-A plus tier 2, where you let the investors sell a little bit of their stock. Because unlike the crowdfunding and the Reg-A and the IPO, Ron, a lot of the times, in a private placement, which is another vehicle to raise money, you can't sell your stock. You can't sell founder stock.
Right.
You have to sell. Right. You're very limited to the type of stock and the disclosures that you can sell to and who you can sell to. Because here, I'll tell you this right now, on a private placement memorandum, you can only sell, not only sell, but one of the restrictions of that is qualified investors. And guys, we've talked about qualified investors on this show multiple times, and we all understand what it means to be a qualified investor. Qualified investor is somebody who has, north of $1 million worth of assets, not including their home, $250,000 of income. These are qualified investors. These guys can look at a PPM and say, yeah, you know what, I want to participate. A guy who is participating in a Reg-A may not be able to participate in a private placement. So there's a lot of different investors that you can reach. Now, for example, if you are an established company, Robbie, okay, and you have proven track record, and you have revenue, and you're what they call post revenue, and you've already have an established concept, and you have proof of concept, right? Then you have multiple ways of accessing the capital markets. You have an initial IPO. You have Reg-A Tier 2. You have, I think those are the two major ones. You can use, Reg-A Tier 1, Reg-A plus Tier 1 if you wanted to. But, let's just say you just want your traditional IPO. But, look, it all depends on the different type of company that you have and what stage of the game your company is, which one that you should consider. I think, Ron, that we could have an entire show, okay, in revolving around what companies, guys, you could kind of give us some questions in regards to what company you have and what's the right vehicle for that company. Not that we're giving you legal advice, okay, because you have to understand what Ron and I do is we're just pointing out information. We're doing an educational we're doing this educationally. We're not trying to give you legal advice. I'm not trying to tell Robbie what position or how to access the capital markets and what vehicle would be the best for his company, because he didn't even tell me that he had a company, okay? What we're trying to do here is we're trying to present an educational a value for everybody to be able to understand the very basics of this stuff, okay? And if you want to get to more and we're just scratching the surface kind of here on the show, if you want to get more involved, you can always reach out to me and Ron. We'll be more than happy to talk to you and talk to you more at length in regards to off air, of course, or maybe you want to come on air and talk about it. But, we can always have these conversations on air or off air. But Ron and I are not giving anybody legal advice on this show. We're not giving anybody investment advice on this show. I want you guys to understand this very clearly. What Ron and I have devoted this show to is we devoted this show to bringing out information about Regulation A. And if that we have to talk about IPOs and private placements and other opportunities like that, then that's what we'll do. We'll have to do that. We'll do that because Ron and I want to have our listeners' best interest in mind. And then, Robbie, man, thank you so much for the question. Hopefully I got around to what you were looking for. If I didn't, follow up with another question if it's more detail that you need. But Ron will give you all the information that you need to get in touch with us. Guys, we really do appreciate the questions that we get on the show on a weekly basis. Keep them coming. I know that we can't get to all of them on the show, but we really do appreciate the feedback. It makes me and Ron happy to know that you guys are out there listening and supporting the show. So, Ron, tell them how they can get involved in the show, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's good to know that we are bringing this information out to people who are looking for it and really can't find it anywhere else. So I'm happy to be doing the show. Folks, you can find us at reg-a-money.com. That's the website, reg-a-money.com. In addition, you can go on to Google, just type in the Reg-A podcast or Reg-A Money Show, and that whole first page will be populated with all our links. We're on the Stitcher platform. We're on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes. We're basically everywhere.